Hello and welcome to the Munro Method Clancast. I am Jason Munro. This is episode 92. Now, today we are going to talk about something that I used to do a ridiculous amount of, and that is stress eating. Now, when I said that in a very specific way, I said that it was something that I used to do. I didn't say it was something that I am. So here's a really important conversation that I have with my members right at the very beginning when they fill in their mini check-in form. So when we talk about their diet history, they will say things like, I am a terrible emotional eater. I am a huge stress eater. I am a massive boredom eater. And when they say that, and here's why it's different to what I just said. When they say that, when they say I am, I'll say to them, I'll go through their check-in. They'll tell me about them being parents and married or whatever. And I can say, look, Susan, you are many things. You're a parent, you're a friend, you're a mother, a wife, or whatever. But what you are not is a stress eater. What you are not is an emotional eater. You are someone who occasionally uses food to cope with stress. You are someone who uses food to cope with their emotions, but you are not an emotional eater. You are not a stress eater. Now, those sound like exactly the same things. And they are describing the same things, but they're not the same thing, because when you identify as something, you are taking it on as a part of who you are. You're taking it on as a part of your personality. You're taking it on as a part of your identity. Versus, I am someone who does this. I am someone who does that. That's a behavior that you have. So if I ask you the question, what do you think would be easier? Not easy, but what do you think would be easier to change? A habit that you have, a behavior that you have, or your personality, or your identity, who you are, right? One of them is very difficult to change, right? It's very difficult to change your identity, very difficult to change who you are, very difficult to change your personality. You can't just, well, I'm just going to be different now. I'm just not going to be like that anymore. I'm going to be less, I don't know, I'm going to be less anxious. I'm going to be less stubborn. You can't just be something, be less of something that you are. There are things that we genuinely are, and we have to work very hard to change them. But when it comes to behaviors, those are completely different. Those are things that you do. Opening your phone and checking it every 5 minutes, that's a thing that you do. You're not a massive phone checker. You're not a massive phone addict. You've developed a habit. And the same is true when it comes to emotional eating or stress eating. Do you know, this is ideal because I had a really great, I always say I had a conversation with someone. It's me talking at people when I do their check-ins and I record their feedback. But I had a great dialogue yesterday for someone around this specific topic. And it's that it doesn't matter how you feel about it, right? You might feel like there's no way out, that you're never going to stop stress eating, that, you can't understand why you do it. You can't see it being any different. Christ, there are people inside the community who will use the ask a question section, and they'll be like, people who have kids, how do you get through your day and not eat? They can't understand it. As far as they're concerned, like, that's just normal behavior. You're supposed to binge eat because your kids are being difficult. You're supposed to eat lots of chocolate at the end of the day because you've had a tough day. It's just because it's what they're used to. They don't know different. They don't know any other way. And they're being genuine when you ask these questions. But I want you to think of it like this, right? There was a time in your life when you did not use food to cope with anything, ever. You may have used other things to cope. You may have taken yourself for a walk. You may have called a friend. You may have played a game, read a book. we are all going through life coping in our own way, right? We all have ways of coping. I mean, I'll tell you some of mine in a bit. But there was a time once when you didn't use anything to cope. Oh, sorry, you didn't use food to cope, but you would have had other coping mechanisms. You just wouldn't have been aware of them. You wouldn't have, even like when we're younger, like we don't think about them as being coping mechanisms. It's like, well, when this happens, this is what I do. When I feel like this is what I do. But at some point in life, let's come up with an example. You are 16 years old. You have been with a boyfriend or girlfriend for the last year in high school, and they have decided that they don't want to be with you anymore. You're going through your first proper breakup. Your world is fucking falling to pieces. It's all coming down around you. You're experiencing emotions you've never experienced before, and you don't know how to process them. You don't know what to do with them, and you don't like how they feel. You want to feel different. You don't want to feel like this, but you don't know how to make the pain go away. And you try things. You try the things that you usually do, like the stuff that usually makes you feel better. You watch something on the TV. I don't know, did we have phones when we were 16? I did. I bought my first phone with my paper round money when I was 13, back when phones cost 30 quid. Um, but anyway, you did whatever it was back then that made you feel nice, that gave you that kind of comfort. But it wasn't enough. You needed something else. And so maybe a parent made a suggestion. Maybe your mum came in with some chocolate and said, "This will cheer you up." Or maybe she came in with some ice cream or a hot chocolate or some sweets and said, "This will cheer you up. This will make you feel better." And it did make you feel better because ice cream, yummy, chocolate. And so that's a shame. I'm not putting that entirely on parents. It's just somehow you ended up with food, but it's just because recently somebody said that. Do you know actually? Somebody posted a win in the group recently, and it was her son had just failed had just failed his driving test, and his mum, who's a member, who's a client, was about to offer him some chocolate to cheer him up. And her win that she came back and posted in the group was, my son failed his driving test today. He was very, very down about it. I went to offer him some chocolate and I stopped myself because why would I want to teach him that chocolate makes things better? And that's a perfect example. Like that person is someone who uses chocolate to cheer herself up. So when she sees her son in that pain, when she sees him upset and how down he is, and she knows how much he's tried and practiced and how many lessons he's done and all the rest of it, she would have known how nervous he was and how built up, and she would have sat in the house desperate to get that call and find out how he got on. And all she wants to do for her son is make him feel better. And for her, she knows that, well, when I feel like that, chocolate makes me feel better. And her win was that she almost offered her son some chocolate, but then stopped and said, why on earth do I want to teach my son that food makes us feel better? That, when we go through something like a failure, like failing a driving test, that chocolate is somehow going to improve that. But that is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. That's how these connections are made. That could be one of the worst things to happen to him in the last few years. His mum comes in with a big chocolate bar and says, "Here you go, son, this will make you feel better." And it does make him feel better, and boom, that connection is made in his brain. In the future, the next time I feel like this is what I'll go and do. And he might never feel like that again in the future, or in any time soon. And it might not be a massive problem, but for many people, it does go on to become a problem. And the way that I think of this is, and especially with stress, right? I used to think I was stressed. Fuck me. Before I was a dad, I had the audacity to think that I knew what stress was when I was single, carefree, living in my own flat. Honestly, looking back now, not a care in the world. I actually had the cheek to think that I was stressed. I even took time off my work with stress. Jesus Christ, that makes me cringe. But back then, that's the only level of stress I knew. So it's all good and well me making a joke about it now, but back then, at that time, that's what I thought stress was. And if you think of it as being on a sliding scale, um, so people might have underlying like disordered eating tendencies their entire lives, but they're very, very mild. So I used to stress eat, but it never really caused a problem with my weight, um, because it was very mild and very minor. But then I met my wife. Then we had our first son, like 6 months after getting together, although we had known each other for years. So it's not like as dramatic as it sounds. It's still dramatic, just not like we weren't complete strangers 6 months before that, and all of a sudden we were pregnant. So 6 months later, pregnant. I think just a month before that, I'd already asked her to move into that flat I just mentioned. Then I started to know what stress was. Then you're dealing with a different level of stress, and now that underlying habit, you're doing it more. You're doing it more regularly, more frequently. You're doing it at a grander scale. So previously, it was a pretty harmless thing, but now you're discovering that the stress that you had before was only 10%. Now you're dealing with 50% stress because you're not sleeping at night and you've got a baby that demands your attention all the time. And I was working 4 days on, 4 days off at the time. So like 4 days of 12.5 hour shifts running on hardly any sleep because Jacob was a terrible sleeper. We had to get help and everything with it. Then 4 days off of him all day. And that was just my life. It felt like, it was just, I mean, that's just, looking back now, that's just what life with kids is like, with very young kids is like. But it was highly stressful at the time. And because I had that underlying tendency to use food to cope with stress, now the stress is ramped up. Now the tendency is ramped up. Now the behavior's ramped up. Now your weights, but the scales are also going up, but now your weight's starting to go up. And it's similar to the thing that I just mentioned with the whole, imagine you're 16 years old, and you're going through something that you've never felt before. You're experiencing a pain that you've never felt before. And you have that chocolate or that ice cream or that whatever it is, and you discover that made me feel good. And then in the future, you feel like that again. And you remember, well, do you know what? The last time I felt like this, do you know what really helped me? A big bowl of ice cream. And off you go and get some Haagen-Dazs at 6 million calories a tub. So, where were we? Oh, yeah. So anyway, going back, there was once a time when you didn't stress eat, or you have a coping mechanism, or you had a different coping mechanism. Now, the reason that's important is if you had a point in life previously where you didn't do a thing, then you can get back to that. If you had a point previously where you used an alternative coping mechanism, you can get back to that. The thing about food is it's immediate. Like, when making suggestions to people about, okay, instead of stress eating, what could I do? You can't say, oh, well, you could meditate. Like you can't just start meditating and that fixes it. You can't just listen to podcasts and that fixes it. The thing about food is it's immediate, right? It gives you an immediate distraction. It makes you feel immediately better because you're not sitting munching apples and strawberries. You're eating chocolate, crisps, sweets, cakes, whatever it is. It immediately makes you feel better because of the type of food and the taste, and that's stimulating you in that way. But it also immediately makes you feel better because it's a distraction. Instead of whatever the thing is occupying 100% of your thoughts, it's now only occupying 30% of your thoughts, and it gives you that mental and physical relief because we can experience physical stress. I get it in the back of my neck. That's when I know that I'm working too hard or doing too much. I start to feel it pressing on the back of my neck. And if I went and got something to eat, that pressure on my neck would lift. And that's how this cycle starts, where it's, well, if I'm eating this and that's going away, then all I need to do is keep eating to keep making that go away, right? And that's how people get trapped with things like stress eating, emotional eating, using food to cope with things, and then struggle to get out of it. Because like I said, food is immediate, but it's also easy. You can get food anywhere. You can stop your car anywhere at a shop and grab something. You can go to your kitchen at any time and grab something. Food is never far away, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's easy and it's immediate. But you can replace it. So, like I said, I used to use food to cope with stress a lot until I finally realized what I was doing. It was even something that was happening when I first became a nutritionist. I had gone through my own weight loss transformation, shall we say. And again, I discovered a new level of stress. So I went from being someone who just worked for a company, who had no wife, who had no kids, living by myself. Christ, life was much better than I realized it was at the time. Then I had my first son. Then I got married. Then I had my second son. And then, no, sorry, I started the business when Claire was pregnant with Kerr. Then I started a business, what I do now. Started building this in 2017, launched it in 2018 while Claire was pregnant with our second, and discovered a new level of stress that made the stress eating even more apparent. But because I was going down the pathway of becoming a nutritionist, I was like, okay, I've actually just realized that this is something that I'm doing. And if I don't get a handle on this, this is going to get out of control. So for a while, I had to work on it. It's different now, and it changes and it rotates all the time. Back then it was exercise. I got very into running. Back when I first became a nutritionist, I had set up a running Instagram. I went out for a 10K one day, ran my first half marathon. So I got into running at the time. That was my kind of release, because at the same time I'd came from a high activity job, walking to and from work, to walking from my front door to the shed in my back garden that I turned into an office. So, and then spending all day at a desk. So running kind of helped in two of those things. And then various other things. Sleep stories were a big thing for me. I loved sleep stories, de-stressing at the end of the day. I'm a huge audiobook person. Sleep stories were my thing back then. Not anymore. I can't listen to sleep stories now. Probably because they go back to my very bad mental health days, and I use them to try and help with that. I get PTSD now when I think about sleep stories. Anyway, I had to discover new outlets, new things to help cope with stress. And something that I found very helpful, especially back then, because I was terrified to take a day off. I was working 7 days a week. I find that having things to look forward to, and this is something I work on a lot with some of my clients, some of my private clients too. I find that having things to look forward to massively helps, and especially if you're a parent, especially if you're someone in a high pressure job. One of my private clients, she has a great job and also has two kids. She plays badminton. She also had two kids that play tennis and do something else, I forgot, but quite competitively. So she's working, she's taking kids to training, her husband works away sometimes. She's got very little time left for herself, right? It's always like, what's next? And she struggles a lot with stress eating. But what we've discovered over time is a lot of that is because she's snatching and grabbing at moments of pleasure and joy throughout the day. Because if your day just consists of getting kids ready for school, or just getting yourself ready for work, commuting, working, commuting home, cooking dinner, plonking yourself in front of the TV, going to bed and doing it all over again, that gets tired. That gets very tired very quickly. That's no way to live. And this is when we start snatching and grabbing, and when we start coping. And it's when people, it's when you start needing something to look forward to. It's why people will suddenly decide at 4:00 in the afternoon that they're getting a takeaway. I've had a shit day. I need to inject some joy, some pleasure, something exciting into my day. I'm going to get a Domino's. And then you get all excited and it becomes a whole deal. And you're not just going to go get a small pizza and have it with a side salad. You're going to get the two big pizzas and the two sides and the dessert and the big bottle of juice and all the rest of it. And it's because you're trying to inject something, anything, into your day to break it up. So let me just run, and with that client, we've kind of established that you need to do more things for yourself. You need to have more things planned just for you. So every month she does something big like a spa day. Every week she does something minor like something else. But this is a pattern that I work to as well. So it takes time to get to the point where you entirely replace your stress eating with other things, but you need to do it safe in the knowledge that stress eating was something that you didn't do at some point. You used something else. And if you can switch over to food and use food, you can switch over to something else and use something else. So here are some things that I use every day to help me manage my stress levels. Number one, I'll just say these as they spring to mind. Number one is light incense. I'm looking at it just now. I'll probably light some after this. When I did a meditation course from my teacher, Cam Cooney Meditation, look him up on Instagram. If you fancy doing a 3-day meditation course, it was phenomenal. Every day we went to his studio in Glasgow. He also does it online. But for 3 days in a row over a weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, went to his studio in Glasgow. He always lights incense, and he lights something called Nag Champa, which I buy in bulk from Amazon now and light on a daily basis because I've associated that scent. I've never really thought about this, but I probably associate that scent with going to that meditation course and doing the meditations in that environment. It was very calming, very relaxing, and I think that's why I brought it home and maintained it as a practice. As soon as the first smell of that hits my nose, I settle into my day really well. I don't light it every single day. I actually didn't light any yesterday, which was interesting, considering how tough a day it was yesterday. But it's something that I have in my toolbox. The next thing is lo-fi hip hop, LO-FI, lo-fi hip hop on Spotify. Hip hop music, no lyrics, just very chilled, very mellow. That plays in the background. My friend Nick put me onto that a good few years ago now. I also listen to movie soundtracks or spa music. You know, if you've ever been to a spa and you go in and they've got that music playing, you can find that on Spotify. I'll have that playing in the background. On a daily basis, the things that I have to look forward to are switching my computer off, shutting my office door, and going to make dinner. Because I enjoy making dinner, because I love knowing that I'm cooking for people. I love knowing that I'm giving my kids a wonderfully balanced meal. I'm helping with their health. That brings me a lot of satisfaction and joy. But also, as soon as I go into the kitchen, I put my headphones in and I get to listen to whatever I'm listening to. My audiobook goes on, or the podcast I'm listening to goes on. So that's my little end of the day thing. If things are really tough, I'll take myself for a walk, or I'll take myself into the gym and run on the treadmill or lift some weights. And the final one is I'll go for a nap. So for me, naps are probably the closest replacement there is for food, because it's a break from how you're feeling. So it's like a distraction. If I've got a lot of stress in my shoulders, tension in my shoulders, a lot of stress building up, I've done all the usual things, I'm still feeling quite stressed, I will stop what I'm doing at a realistic time, or I'll either stop and go for a nap around 2 before I pick up the kids from school, or I'll pick up the kids from school at 3, come home and say, look, get a snack, get a drink, I am going for a nap for the next 30, 45 minutes. And it's almost like it just helps me hit a reset button. Now, I'm lucky that I'm in the position that I can do that. I work from home. I'm my own boss. I can take that time if I need it. I know it's not for everyone, but these are just some things that I do. Oh, and then there's also the weekend stuff. So I always make sure I have something happening at the weekend. Now, that's not about keeping busy or anything like that. It's giving myself something to look forward to. So, for example, last weekend, I climbed a mountain on Sunday. I went up Ben Lomond with my brother-in-law. This weekend, Friday, I'm going to Coventry again with my wife for a dog show, and I'm looking forward to the drive down and the time we'll spend together and the meal we'll have at the hotel, well, the inn. And I just love traveling and being on the road. So these are all my kind of short-term things that I've got to look forward to. And these are the things that I can say, well, yes, this is a tough day, but you've got that great thing coming up on Friday. Yes, you're having a tough day, but you know, in 2 hours' time, you'll be listening to your book, you'll be listening to your podcast or your audiobook, making the dinner. So a lot of the coping that we do, and this isn't just limited to stress eating, like people use alcohol to cope, people use excessive screen time to cope. These are all things that we do to inject something into our day. We're trying to find joy. We're trying to find excitement. We're trying to find pleasure where there is none. And that's mostly our fault because we allow our lives to shrink so small that it does just become work and or kids and bed and food and waking up the next day and doing the same shit all over again. That's our fault. That's on us. We allow our lives to shrink so small that we then have to reach out from our shrunken life that doesn't go beyond our four walls. It doesn't go beyond the couch or the living room or the TV. And it's like, okay, well, this is my life now because I don't plan anything. I don't do stuff at the weekends. I don't plan nights out or weekends away. So what I'll do is, and once you allow it to shrink so much, it might have been fine for a while, but now it's like, okay, how do I make this better? Well, let's open a bottle of wine, or I could get some chocolate. Let's get a takeaway, or I'm just going to sit here and scroll Facebook for the next 3 hours or watch funny videos on TikTok. We're all coping. Everybody's coping their way through lives. And it's not just limited to food. It's not just limited to drink. It's not just people who are struggling with their weight. There are people who are a very healthy weight who still have excessive screen time or coping mechanisms that are completely different. Just because someone's not using food to cope with stress or their emotions, it doesn't mean that they're not using something else. But there are much more positive outlets that will support your health than adding unnecessary weight to your body or whatever. Anyway, Christ, that was a long one. That's enough from me. Until next time.